Welcome inside the Broncos studio. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Thanks to our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and Hall of Famer Steve Atwater. The Broncos announced their 53-man roster, and following practice, head coach Sean Payton spoke on the depth of the roster and emphasized making some tough decisions. How do you view the depth of the Broncos team?
Yeah, I think that Sean Payton put it well when he said that this is the most difficult it's been since he's been here. And he said a couple years ago that meeting's pretty quick. This year, it's lasting hours and hours as you're trying to decide not just who should be on the roster, but what's the right 53. And obviously, with the practice squad and that going to 16 players a couple years ago, you can now kind of use roster mechanics to your advantage. But you see the depth of this team. I think it speaks really highly to what George Payton and Sean Payton have done to build this up. But it makes for some tough decisions, right? And Sean Payton said it's not just about looking at the quotas at each position. Is it 2 quarterbacks? Is it 6 defensive linemen? It's also picking the right players.
Yeah, and it's a good problem to have when you have so many good players that it's difficult to get rid of, one player over another. And the competition has been great in training camp. I know at the running back position, we weren't really sure what was going to happen.
I think that running back room, Steve, like you mentioned, was one of the position groups that stood out when you look at this roster. In addition to R.J. Harvey and J.K. Dobbins, you've got Tyler Bidet, you got Jaleel McLaughlin, and Sean Payton said the versatility that Bidet had really helped him. We saw him return a kick. I think 40-plus yards in that last game, and then obviously made the most both on the ground and through the passing game. So he did enough, and Sean Payton said, hey, at some point it'll become clear who's going to make this roster at running back. I thought it did become clear, but Elisa certainly wasn't the only position group that was a difficult one to make and where there were some interesting decisions.
Well, he definitely talked about the different needs, and he says you look at other teams and their needs, but you also have to look at your own team. And he called it an imperfect business, but you have to do what you can to find that right 53. But when you look at the different positions, I feel like the offensive line, the continuity that they're able to build out, that also stood out.
Yeah, it was the same 9 from last year, the exact same 9. And so when you think about the continuity, that's so rare. I mean, Steve, I bet looking back at your career,
I don't remember that happening too.
It's good to have
the exact same guys on the team, but when you have the continuity and also just the that relationship amongst those guys, they all feel comfortable with one another. The coaches have confidence in them, and they play really well together. And you can mix and match guys however you want to, and they're still going to be productive, and that's a very good thing for the offensive line.
And the depth there, I think, is just really impressive. We keep talking about the depth. Frank Crum is a guy who, maybe he was getting in there after a Matt Parrott or an Alex Palczewski, and yet Sean Payton said they're getting calls from 3 teams about potentially picking him up, trading for him. So that speaks to the depth of that position, and it's just one of the spots that we saw.
That's a big man, too. He's a big man.
It's a big man, but also when he is a big man, the ceiling is high, and that's what Sean Payton mentioned about him as well, is the fact that his growth and the way he's been able to continue to develop has been impressive. And a lot of the guys spoke on that too. Mike McGlinchey was one of them, just saying it's been great just being with him and seeing his development and seeing what he can add. Now, looking at the defensive side and the defensive line, at the inside linebacker position, some changes were made as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, the tradition continues, right? I think 21 of the last 22 years, an undrafted free agent has made the initial 53-man roster. This year, Karene Reed, inside linebacker out of Utah. This is a guy that in college I thought had a really productive career dating back to a year like 2022. I think dealt with some injuries, but this is a guy that, Steve, when he was on the field this preseason, he flashed, and certainly well-deserving of that spot and carries on that tradition.
Man, this guy made plays, and that's what it's about in the preseason, especially for young players, guys who are trying to make the squad. You got to do something to stand out to get the coach's attention, and Karene Reed, he did that. He made plays, interception, run on the special teams, looked like he had great energy. It was fun to watch him play.
Yeah, and there were several guys that you thought had a chance, and Sean Payton talked about he pitches to undrafted free agents, hey, come to Denver because this organization has a history of it. He, as a head coach, has a history of it, and that matters, I think, to guys when they're looking for that landing spot. He said Karene Reed was a guy they had a draft grade on, and so to be able to get him onto this initial 53, I think is important. And listen, we'll see kind of how it all pans out, but wasn't it last week that Rod Smith was here?
I know, there was.
Philip Lindsay. I mean, there's some dudes that have been undrafted free agents for this team.
Yep, going on to make huge contributions too, and I'm glad that we're an organization that's known for that, because when guys go out and just leave everything on the field and they're having a good time, everybody can notice that. They notice that this person loves to play football. They love the game, and they can be an asset to the organization.
And head coach Sean Payton, one thing that he mentioned that I found interesting, when he said some of these conversations, I let them know, this doesn't mean that the door is closed, right? Like, there's still a chance that you might come back in a different capacity, or we may see you down the line. He was like, I've had stories where I have a conversation and a couple days later, the guys are back in the building. So I think giving that positivity to the guys and letting them know that the tradition does continue in different ways is also a big part. But I know that the roster and the practice squad roster is a little more fluid as the days go on.
Yeah, we're just getting started here. It's the initial 53 for a reason. Tuesday night, the scouts, they're going to be looking at over 1,000 players, really.
Got the work cut off for them.
That's right. I mean, there's a bunch of guys all over the league, and this is a tough day, Steve, for a lot of guys that see their dream. Maybe it's delayed. For some of them, maybe it comes to an end here. You hope not, but this is a time where it's also an opportunity to evaluate a lot of talent across the league. Sean Payton talks a lot about you don't want to see talented players leave your building, but maybe it's a chance to bring some talented guys inside your building. So it's just an initial 53. You could still see some movement, and Sean Payton talked about over the first couple of weeks of the season, really, you see that before it finally starts to slow down. But the Broncos, they prioritize, again, the right 53, keeping that depth. You got 7 defensive linemen. That hasn't happened since 2016, but it's because you've got good players that you don't want to lose. And so it's a process, and like you said, Elisa, it's not a perfect science, but it seems like the Broncos did a nice job of figuring this all out.
Well, there you have it, Broncos country. Remember, we have you covered on all the latest regarding the 53-man roster and more on denverbroncos.com.